Hello and welcome to podcast 9. So the person I'm talking to today, I'm really excited about, is Heather Ackroyd. We know each other only a tiny bit, so it'll be really interesting exploration to talk together today. I was very inspired by listening to her on Culture Declares Emergency and looking at her work, but I'm not an expert, so we just look forward to having a good chat. So I'm just going to give a quick visual description, audio description. So I'm a woman with grey, I'm sitting in front of a cream screen with wooden slats. I'm a 6-year-old woman with grey hair. I've got dark glasses on, a pink scarf and a dark top. And in the summer, it looks like I've got olive skin, but I don't think it does now. Hi, Heather.
Hello there, Jo. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm Heather Ackroyd of Ackroyd and Harvey, a collaborative practice for 33 years. And I'm sitting in a very lime green top. I have dark hair. I'm a 64-year-old woman. And I have to say here, I don't dye my hair. One of those things, but I am partially deaf. So something's going to give somewhere along the line. And yeah, I'm very, very happy to have this conversation. So however you want to play it or ask a question, Jo.
Oh, thank you. Well, what I usually do, just to sort of situate it, is say what inspires you. And then what we're going to go on to the meaty question is, what would you do now in this time if you could do anything you like? So money, no holds barred, it would actually happen. So it's always quite nice though, just to ask people basically what inspires them, because that obviously, especially as a creative, is the thread in your life.
No, it's such a great question. And I think that sort of blue sky thinking, it's really interesting actually, Jo, because we did a workshop a few years ago, and we actually gave the groups that. You said, you have a budget, you have a team of people to support you here, be it producers, media, social media, what is the vision, what is the ambition? And it was just so revealing, because people just allowed themselves to really, really be very, very playful. And so often, frustrations are because there is just not the financial resources available all the time available to really be able to kind of, to go out and make those much larger steps towards what we feel. What we feel may be necessary. An author friend, Kegi Carew, who's just written a book called Beastly, she did a project a few years ago called The World, The World the Way I Want It. I work very, very collaboratively. I think that is very, very important. And I'm very interested in cross-disciplinary work, interested in history, ecology, geography, geology, and psychology, health. I have a very restless energy and appetite for information and activity. I think if I'm really going to kind of focus this, what is very, very troubling, undoubtedly, the climate crisis, the huge and continuing use of fossil fuels, which is just increasing, not decreasing, with all of the knowledge that we now have about it, under a government who is determined to create a bonfire of every green vanity they can at the moment, rather than seeing the vision that is absolutely necessary. This country, the UK, is one of the most nature depleted countries in the world. We rank sort of 16th. Ireland is actually ranks 13th. So, actually we have to understand to some extent what has been happening here. And without a doubt, the UK has suffered over the centuries as a result of land enclosures, which is basically people being kicked off the land, no longer allowed. It's a kind of form of privatization. And if you actually look at the stats on that, a fifth of England, I believe, has sort of been taken into either the hands of the gentry, into the hands of other organized corporations, or however it played out. More historically, I think we're looking at, 5,000 acts of parliament about taking land away, so that the common person no longer could graze their animals, collect water, firewood, or grow, go and grow on the commons. Industrial agriculture, the Industrial Revolution, people being pushed out of rural places into factories, And, you know, I mean, just the historical counterpart of the abuses, you know, it is shocking when you look back at the history of how people were so dispensable and, you know, again, profit going into the hands of a very, very few people. And then to expand that out, just again, the role of empire, the role of colonization, and as a wonderful activist academic Vandana Shiva says, colonization was the Enclosure Act on a global scale. So if money is absolutely no object, and working with really, really extraordinary people would be to take as much land into communal, I'm not using the word ownership.
Yeah, because it's not quite the right word, is it? But sort of
communal creative custodianship.
Yes.
And very much working with ecologists to really understand what the dynamics of that land are, but also placing very, very firmly within that culture, health, education, and ecology, so that there is a possibility for people to come on board and work as they may wish voluntarily, but also to really create jobs as well, to really increase land for food production, local food production as well, to increase that resilience, to look at the health of the rivers, look at the health of the forests, and also look at the health of the people who live here, live around, because, we know that anxiety is increasing. We know that, children are suffering on very, very many levels with their mental health at times. So I'd kind of put together a really extraordinary team, but really look at the nuances of place and not try and sort of create one overall template beyond and trying to follow the Schumacher, small is beautiful, so that people really, really can self-realize and kind of group realize, so that everybody plays to strengths. And and can actually, I still do believe in directors. I don't have an issue with directors at all, but I still think at the same time everybody within that team needs to feel that they've got full stretch of their imagination and their agency.
That's fantastic. And I met once, they came to the Eden Project, something called the Barefoot College, which was in India, and they were doing very much that. They were doing it from the roots up, and they were saying, if someone's going to come in and do something for us, here are the experts. Here's a man who's worked on the river all his life. Please don't come in and just sort of impose something on us. Please listen to people, because and every ecosystem is nuanced, isn't it? I mean, in Cornwall, where I live, we were just talking about where we live earlier, and it's like literally you move 5-10 miles, it's a different landscape. It's not same at all.
Exactly. And it can shift, as dialect shifts. I love the way that dialects will shift as you move, a matter of miles at times, and the way that words will bubble up, which sometimes have a really strong root, going back to the land as well. It's interesting you mentioned the Barefoot College, because that sort of came onto my radar a number of years ago. And again, I was finding it so very, very inspirational, the way it works. And I think in a way, not being impositional, there's a really, I've been involved with an initiative called Endangered Landscapes, which is run through the Cambridge Conservation Initiative. And it has big vision, large landscapes stretching from as far east as Georgia and the Carpathian Mountains, through to the Cairngorms up in Scotland and to Wales. And I think Wales is a point in fact, because the Welsh farmers were so frustrated and upset, from what I've gathered, of being yet again, an impositional idea of how the land should be looked after, how farming, should really be, and they just sort of feel that they are some sort of, kind of like football for the next sort of impositional idea. And in fact, trust was so foundationally broken there that actually the endangered landscapes had to step back. But where they work, and where they have been working very much with the people on the ground, and particularly with people who have been there ancestrally in some cases. I was one of the judges, and it was very much about bringing in artists. So there were 8 different endangered landscapes, and there were 8 artists, or small collectives who were kind of awarded. a kind of an R&D and then an implementation of their ideas. And the one that eventually won it was called Interbeing, and by Nico di Transylvania, who is originally from Romania. And, you know, she went into the south and she met women who sang songs taught to them by their mothers. And, you know, they just these beautiful flutes and instruments that are so particular to place, and how the forest and the land breathe through stories and dreams and thinking and feeling. And she did a really beautiful vinyl and a festival as well with a live performance with an near 80-year-old woman who'd never, who barely left her village. It was very, very moving and very powerful.
Yes, I think well, we have that. I mean, my husband used to farm, and he said, you know, his neighbouring farmer never really left. You know, went to St Ives on his honeymoon. That was about 10 miles away. You know, and I'm very Cornish. I feel the land in me. You know, I think it's a very interesting thing. It's also an interesting thing how to hold that particular sense of place and not be insular, isn't it? And still to care globally, and you know, try to reduce some of the terrors of colonization. I'm not sure we can, if colonialism. It's just fascinating. And Elizabeth, who I talked to before you, and that's one of the reasons why I thought I wanted to talk to you, was talking very much about, she talked about art and education and activism. And then she talked about in education, how it needs to be more joined up thinking, you know, scientists with artists, and that sort of interweaving collaboration where you're not just doing one or the other, that we learn to think in. And I think sometimes that we haven't really taught our children how to think in ecosystems and to think in circles and collectively. And I know she said she finds it's changing now, which is good. But I think that's fascinating.
No, I think it's very true. I mean, I actually, in 1977, went to this college, which, you know, had more of a reputation for sport. And it was in this place called Alsager, which is near Crewe. But it was offering the very, very first combined degree. So it was no longer about the fine arts or, you know, the pure arts. It was very much about hybrid. It was about taking two disciplines from a choice of five and really looking at the fusion or the kind of, you know, the plasticity and, you know, that kind of the hybridization. So I concentrated on theatre and sculpture, visual arts. And I was very fortunate because in my second year, the artist in residence who actually shared my Nissen hut with me was Cornelia Parker, who stayed a very, very close friend. You know, so it was really remarkable. When Dan and I first worked together in 1991, we were part of a major exhibition at a place called La Fresnois, which is in north of France, near Lille. And that whole school was dedicated to hybrid arts, you know, and it's got a wonderful reputation. And, you know, film and, I mean, just sort of digital technology, you know, kind of AI, you know, it's all up. So I think art is wonderful because you can be a kind of a free radical, you know, free ranging and a free agent to some extent. And it's great the way that you can dissolve boundaries, you know, and you don't have to kind of empirically prove what you're doing. Yes, you do have to be able to critically construct, you know, conceptually what you're talking about. You have to still be able to stay there and be able to put across, you know, why you are doing what you're doing. But I think it's got a beautiful kind of permeability to it. And you know, I think art is fantastic on that level. And, you know, the fact that, you know, you can look now at artists who are farmers, you know, artists who are working so closely with neuroscience, you know, I mean, it's, you know, and this is all very beneficial because, you know, not one of us holds the particular key here. We really are part of a greater collective. And, you know, the Cambridge Conservation Initiative is very much about bringing people, you know, conservationists together, you know, to kind of say, look, we have so much in common here, but also to place art in the center of that too, wherever they can. As ever, money and budgeting is tight. It's incredibly, incredibly difficult. I think to be an artist is, you know, is phenomenally hard to come out with the type of debts that students are now coming out with, you know, is pretty awful. You know, both Dan and I walked out with just a few hundred quid, you know, but certainly we had free education, and it's such a minefield now.
I think that's so sad, isn't it? It makes me terribly sad because I think we've got a brain drain, for want of a better word, on that. Because if you're not allowing everybody to study, there's a load of voices you're not hearing, which are probably crucial to what we're doing. So I think for me, a lot of what I want to try and capture is that I worry that things might collapse. I suppose on a personal level, I think, it's all rattling. And when things rattle, what's going to emerge from underneath? That we need these practices and we need these ideas and these concepts that have been tried a bit that can then be used. But one of the ideas, and I'm very bad on details, so I forgot who did it, but there was a survey of some farmers. People went door to door, they said, in Scotland, and asked farmers, and 60%, if they were paid, some subsidies and helped for it, were open to rewilding their land. Because it is monoculture. We all look at it and go, oh, isn't it beautiful? All these lovely mountains with these sort of sheep on it. Well, it's not always been lovely mountains with sheep on it. So it's history, isn't it? It's all that's like, how far back do you go? But what do you think about rewilding? Because that's one of the things in the mix, isn't it, with landscapes?
I mean, I think again, it's really important to understand the history of why this country is in such a parlous state. Why why so many native creatures are at risk of extinction and being wiped out. And it's very important to understand who owns land and how land is owned. And there's a very good book by Guy Shrubsole called Who Owns England, and latterly he's done a book on on the kind of cool rainforests, as we have many, we have many in this country. This country is very rich in heathland as well. And I think, it's almost like, money is now being thrown at creating woodland, but it may not, and some of that is Sitka. And yes, that spruce woodland, yes, it may still carry on absorbing carbon throughout the year. And I know this is seen as a driver, but actually, the forest floor is often pretty, it's not active, when you look at, oak trees and certain deciduous trees like the hornbeam tree and how much diversity they really, really support. So again, I think the rewilding has to be done, with a really close check on water, soil, health, and really understanding the dynamics, of what really is going to thrive there and what really is going to work there. I think there has been a real large-scale dispossession of many people from place in this country. Again, historically, because people were thrown off the common land and they couldn't survive, and there was a huge need, for bodies in the factories, in the furnaces, to keep the Industrial Revolution, to do what was necessary in the Industrial Revolution. So I think the rewilding, I think again, my understanding is that you could talk about what was analogous, analogous to what was there. I heard a zoologist describe this as analogous to what was there. And also in 2017, we met a really wonderful systems ecologist called Dr. Ranilson Anayaka, who in the 1980s bought some land, very degraded land, in the center of Sri Lanka, and then set about bringing back, all of these species that had been wiped out. His particular passion was snakes and lizards, and he could see that the numbers were just collapsing. His starting point is the watershed, and his starting point is obviously getting rid of the invasive species. But he says something like 70% of plants that grow in Sri Lanka are exotics that have been brought in by the colonizers, over the centuries. So, and he says actually some of those are good and they can actually produce. And, there are adaptations that creatures have made. So, I think again, there is sensitivity around the term rewilding, but on the other hand, I think it is a term that people now kind of understand. And I just want to mention the work that Jeremy Leggett has been doing up around Loch Ness. And also he's really, really interested in creating new economic models that bring people in as shareholders, so that there is a collective tapestry of land ownership, but people can at any point sort of say, well, I'm going to sell my share of land, but that land has been regenerated in a way that is as sensitive to what was there and can cope with what will be here as we go into more extreme climate change scenarios.
I know. Well, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because I really enjoyed learning about donut economics when I first heard about it, because I think that whole thing about a systems change. And we were talking the other day about making some sort of decision. I can't remember what it was now. I think it was in an art space thing. But basically, I was saying, you need to sort of, it's that whole thing of just changing our thinking, isn't it? So that, for me, so that universal design is in whenever we do anything, that it's accessible from the get-go. It's sustainable or circular economy, or however you like to put it, that it's got that sort of regenerative, it's got that sense of not needing more, not waste from the very beginning. And also in a way that the planet and the earth, or the landscape, is another person at the table. It's the other voice. It's like it's part of how we make those decisions now. We can no longer make these sort of just purely profit short-term decisions anymore.
No, I agree. And I think it's, when culture declares emergency sort of arose, sort of came on the scene, very much inspired through, Extinction Rebellion, and just the bravery and the audacity and the boldness of, when XR erupted onto the scene, and that discussion about how taking those principles back to, into culture or architecture or music, literature, such as in, XR Writers Rebel as well. And there were very interesting conversations with Frances Morris when she was the director at Tate Modern, and they declared in July 2019. And she really wanted that to be from the ground up as well, for the artists to actually say, this is needed, this is necessary. She sort of stepped down now, but she's really, really very connected around the environment and around climate change and biodiversity. But there are two new curators and associate curators, and one is very much working with Indigenous artists and looking at, these sort of systems of colonization that have happened over centuries, and the other curator is looking specifically around ecology and ecological networks as well, through curatorship and through artistic practice. So, I mean, that's a great legacy, and that's come about directly through direct action, direct action, peaceful. And I think if you, at any point in the boardroom, if there is an empty chair, but that empty chair is Earth, it is planet Earth, or it is the nature close to your building where you are, be it the river, be it the parks, or, be it something that's about to be developed, I think decisions will be made differently and with nuance, but hopefully with sensitivity. But as we know, many people who come to the table are not of that persuasion. They're not of that persuasion. They don't necessarily even have the compassion, or the empathy to even kind of particularly care that much. Their drivers are other, motives, be it profit, be it greed, be it dashing up money, offshore. So, these impasses as well.
Well, I think that's where for me, it's like it all, I think I was talking about this the other time, it all rattles on the edges, and then in the end the hard bit in the middle has to move. It doesn't move because it wants to move, it moves because everything else is tipping it to move. So there are people that won't agree, and that is where, is it Client Earth or something, that where people are trying to sort of change the law. I think that is really important. And I remember hearing a brilliant woman economist saying that, when the government was bailing out people in the pandemic, if they just put a green clause in, which they'd done in Denmark or somewhere like that, what sort of change there would be. So it's like, yes, of course we can help you, but you have to, and people would accept it. So I think it's like we were talking about just a very small arts project funding the other day. And in the evaluation, I said, well, can we just write in something about sustainability or something in it next time when you put out that bid? So now there is a little bit in the bid. How will you make this more sustainable or more ecological or whatever? And it just has to become part of what's going on. So even if people don't agree with it, it's just part of what's talked about, isn't it? At least that's something.
No, I agree, Jo. And you could see the Gallery Climate Coalition, who have really been moving in on the blue chip galleries, and how they're actually sort of really demanding that there is, proper accountability for, you know, all of the art being shipped across the world, right, left and center. And also, I think they're really encouraging money to go back to for environmental lawyers such as Client Earth. So rather than, you know, planting trees, which was the kind of the popular one, of the notion of offsetting. And I know there is a huge criticism of this. I absolutely understand this. But I still sort of think, well, if you are going to put money into the pot, just sort of put it into Client Earth or into you know, environmental lawyers who are really, really trying to move round systems of social justice and climate justice. And I think that is a good thing. You know, but I still, you know, it is, yeah. You know, we took part in the Dear Earth exhibition at the Hayward Gallery this summer. And it was really good to see, you know, the work that's happening across, you know, the different art forms, different artists. I think there were maybe 5 of us who were involved in activism, you know, and again, there was a bigger discussion about actually, do we all need to become activists? Because, you know, it's just becoming, you know, you can just see, you know, the flooding, and, you know, I mean, it's just been the inferno, you know, what do they call it? It was the hounds of hell, wasn't it? The 3-headed hound of hell. The summer that Europeans were calling it, was it Cerebus, was it?
I can't remember.
Yeah,
well,
I mean,
yeah,
absolutely like a furnace. And, you know, people were saying it's been bad before, but, you know, now we're just going, actually, I heard some farmers saying, you know, actually we wanted to be lay our bones here on this land, but we're just beginning to think that this land is not going to be, it's just, you know, everything's perishing around us. And, you know, we don't think the land, and also their spring had completely dried up. It was very, very, you know, it was very moving. And again, that kind of grip of, you know, anxiety that we all have at times about, well, I say we, but, you know, people who are discussing as we are have at times, you know, what can we do? What needs to be done?
Yes, it's hard. I mean, just as a little ending, we've just been, Shell's got a very small commission a lovely little commission for the Tate in St Ives, and their little winter festival is called Together for Change, which is great. And they're one of the few places which is so open to all of that, which is great. And there was a lovely exhibition at the cathedral near us, and also, which was also great, in a local garden. So people came through in the summer to see it, and it was called In It Together. So I think that, you know, definitely in the landscape, in the cultural landscape in Cornwall, most people are making relevant work now. And we were in a project which was all about rewords, and I said, well, I don't know that anyone could be really doing something which isn't relevant now, even if it's sort of slightly nuanced. But I think we all need to be having voices, and it's about your time now, I think, isn't it?
No, I think
one last thing I always say to people, if you've got something else you're thinking of, because quite often when one's talking, one goes like, oh yes, but this. So,
well, we could do another conversation in a month's time.
We could, that would be fun. Are you going somewhere nice for a month then, or are you busy?
We've just come back from Tipperary in Ireland, where a project called Field Exchange is happening, and we slow traveled over, and then there was just, you know, devastating flooding in County Cork. One of the artists, you know, had to bring her 3 boys because the schools were closed. You know, and actually that's very much about agroforestry and about, you know, just really bringing back kind of mixed plantings, you know, organic permaculture, but also you know, dedicating fields back back for trees, or having a lot more trees and bushes. So it was a really great project. And that will be happening. There'll be a festival in 2024, and actually mental health as well. One of the artists is also a psychotherapist, and he's been working specifically, and it's kind of, you know, strength together as well, about, you know, how culture and, you know, how culture and well-being are really, you know, to really bring that much more into being as well, but also and, you know, how we respect land and how we treat land. So
yes, let's have a talk in a month's time then, because we were talking about social prescribing things earlier, weren't we, in culture and mental health. So that would be really fantastic. Thank you very much, Heather. It's really kind of you to give us your time.
Take care. Bye.